Thank you for joining another Mold Talks. Today I have a really amazing guest. It's Emily, and Emily is actually from Texas Mold Inspectors. But we're actually going to dive into her story before she ever was part of that organization to get a real understanding of what she and her family went through. So Emily, without further ado, thank you so much for being here, being vulnerable today, sharing your story. Really appreciate it. And I know that it's going to help empower people because I know this story is so unique. So, any go ahead and introduce yourself. Anything I left out, feel free to make acquaintance.
Thank you first off for having me on. I appreciate that. Know you introduced me very well. So I'm Emily with Texas Mold Inspectors today. Before Texas Mold Inspectors, I was just Emily, a mom, and then we went through mold and everything changed.
Yeah, so let's dive into this. When were you not feeling well, and how long did it take for you to figure out it was mold, and you just kind of introduce us to what happened to you guys.
So I'll preface this with my family was in transition of making a big life change. We were living in Austin. Both my husband and I had great careers. I worked for home builders. My husband had his own remodeling company. And we had just had our firstborn son, Sebastian. We wanted to slow our life down and actually spend more time as a family. So we decided to move and take an offer of going into the restaurant industry. So we in a small town called Livingston. And so we moved our family from Austin to a small town called Livingston. And unbeknownst to us, we moved right into a home that was full of toxic molds, numerous toxic molds. We couldn't see it. It was all hidden. But that first week, due to the amount of toxicity in this indoor environment, all of us started to show symptoms. Even my dogs were sick. So it was the first week, honestly, Mike.
And at the time, you had no idea that there was this toxicity that was causing you to be sick. Is that right?
Correct. Of course, when you make a move, like when you actually move anyways, it's stressful. So the people that knew us use stress as maybe the reason why all of a sudden my hormones were out of whack and I was feeling sick. Maybe that's why my dogs started to act as if they were very scared and go to the bathroom in the house when they were potty trained. Maybe that's why my son was just screaming all the time that first week and having GI issues. So that first week, people were just kind of thinking, well, maybe it's just because you just moved and it's stress and it's a new area too.
Got it. Yeah, and we can tend to normalize certain things when we're not feeling well, or we're looking for answers. We're kind of grasping onto anything that could make sense. I can totally relate to that. I guess from there, so you started to grasp at other things, think it was other things, and then what kind of led that transition to maybe it's mold? Is there, did someone mention it to you? Did you accept that right away? Did it take a while? Let me know kind of where things are from there.
Well, after that first week went by and I was still starting to struggle with my hormones being out of whack for no apparent reason. I've never had any menstrual cycle problems, no hormone issues in my life. And my son was 10 months old at the time, and my son was sick for the first time since he was born. He started to have all this a lot of congestion, a lot of problems with diarrhea out of nowhere. He seemed to be more fussy. Josh started to have sinus issues. And of course, my dogs were biting at themselves like they were infested with fleas when they weren't. They were just very itchy. And a few weeks in, I started to think, well, something's obviously attacking us all. What could it be? One of my clients back in Austin who was building a home with me started to tell me about how dangerous mold was. At that time, and still at this time in this moment in the townhome, I never believed mold could do anything other than maybe cause some sinus or allergic type reactions. I was that type of person. So when this person back in Austin was telling me all these things that mold can do, I kind of thought she was crazy. And I didn't look at any of the articles she was emailing me every single day to look at. I wish I had, but I didn't. So because she did do that, which was good, she did plant the seed. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to take my son to the doctor. I'm going to tell him what's going on and see what he says. And so it's even documented on my son's medical record that I asked him about mold and if mold could be the cause for all of these issues my son Sebastian had developed, as well as me. Even though I was at a pediatrician's office, I even told him, I said, look, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z. Something's different. And I'll never forget, not only did he look at me straight in the eyes and tell me, no, mold can't do any of that and cannot be the culprit. But he also told me that maybe it's just because I just moved here and the allergens in this area are different. And he suggested that I go find a local honey person and buy a local honey and start like consuming that every day, because that might help build up tolerance to these new allergens. And unfortunately back then I didn't know that medical doctors weren't educated on mold illness. So
Right.
I took him at his word and just thought if the doctor said, no, it can't be mold, then obviously it's not mold. And so
Well, that's very interesting. Did you actually try this whole honey approach, by the way? I'm just out of curiosity.
Unfortunately I did, because I was pulling at straws, I was
Yeah.
trying to find anything that would work. So I actually did go look for some local honey.
Okay. And did it work?
No, it didn't.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
obviously I was still being exposed to poison. So
Yeah.
nothing's going to work unless you actually stop that exposure.
I really did want it to work, just for the sake of this, because that would be just so much easier if all we had to do is have local honey when we move. And it sounds like a very interesting technique to maybe adapt to some of the microbiome of the area. But of course, if you're living inside the problem, it's not going to help with that, right? So that was very interesting. That I've never heard a doctor kind of mention that before. So I thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So from there, you went, I guess, deeper into the rabbit hole of it can't be mold, it's got to be other things.
Yes. So unfortunately, whenever you're trying to search for things, but you continue to get sicker and sicker, you stop searching sometimes because you're just so sick. And about 7 months, or I think it was about 7 months into this townhome. And here's the thing that's tricky with mold also, is that when you're sick with mold, it affects everybody differently. So it's not as if I was sick every single day. The first few months, it would come in waves, and I would have a few symptoms here and there. But then as I stayed in the environment, my symptoms would get worse and they would be more frequent. And by that time, I was kind of paralyzed in this house. I don't even know how to better explain it, other than I was just doing everything I could every single day just to take care of my son and then get back to bed and take some Advil or something to just relieve these symptoms that I was experiencing.
Well, let's explore that. What symptoms were you experiencing?
My first symptoms were my hormones just went crazy. I never had any menstrual cycle problems, and all of a sudden my menstrual cycles became very off, very painful. I'd have a period, I'm sorry, too much information,
It's
not
okay.
every 30 days. Sometimes I would have it, every 15 days, then, 10 days later, then maybe 45 days later. And it was always very painful too. I did go to the doctor for that. They did an ultrasound and they of course found nothing. But that was my first symptoms. As I stayed in, I started to develop hair loss. I developed anxiety out of nowhere that was debilitating anxiety. Not the kind of anxiety where you're kind of scared to go talk in front of people, the kind to where you're put on the ground, you can't function, you're just screaming out of nowhere because you feel like everything's going to just like doom and gloom. And I developed acne all over my face and my back like I was a 13-year-old kid. I started to have dental issues, tons of fatigue, headaches were debilitating to where you couldn't even touch my head. I couldn't wear my hair in a ponytail because my head was so inflamed. It just hurt to even put my hair in a ponytail. Static shocks, heart palpitation issues, night sweats pretty much every single night. Not in the beginning, but the night sweats kind of started around, I think, month 8 or month 9 in this place. Short-term memory issues. I couldn't remember anything. at all, which caused a lot of fights between me and my husband because he would swear up and down that we had this conversation and I'd swear we didn't. So those were some of my symptoms. We had a lot more, but those were some of my more common ones that I had.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you went through quite a bit, and it's very helpful. I know for people listening who are trying to, going through similar challenges and trying to relate. So you went through all these symptoms. You're in this house. You go to doctors. They're telling you, it can't be mold. Try some honey. Your friend keeps sending you articles. At what point does it really start to click that it could be potentially mold?
It clicked whenever we left the house. For the first time in 13 months, my family and I went to go visit my brother in a different state. And for the first time in 13 months, all of a sudden, my husband, myself, and my son actually started to feel better. My son, Sebastian, who again was 10 months old at the start of his exposure, who was perfectly healthy going into this environment, who was meeting all of his, developmental milestones. Now we're 13 months in, he's almost 2. And he came to life for the first time because he had kind of like went away in this townhome. He was so sick, like the light in his eyes just like dimmed. And it came back when we were out of this environment. And so my husband and I knew that obviously it has to be the home because that's the number one common factor that we're all being exposed to. And on our way back to this townhome from Alabama to Livingston, we got a text message from some tenants that rented a home by the same landlords who knew us, and their son had been hospitalized several times. They didn't know why. The doctors thought their son Cody had developed cystic fibrosis, but luckily they discovered it was mold causing all of their son's symptoms. And so they texted us out of nowhere. It was a godsend, literally, because we're driving home trying to like figure out, what it could be. Then we get this text message saying that their son Cody's fine, that they got him out of the house, that it was actually mold in the house causing all of Cody's symptoms. And when we saw that text message, we knew it was mold in our townhouse. So we went home, got it tested, and sure enough, our home was full of toxic molds. Just
Wow.
And like hidden in the wall cavities, the HVAC system, and so forth.
That was the world working in mysterious ways. It kind of all connected right from that point on. That's amazing. So now you're on the way back, and I'm guessing at that point you're like, what do we do, right? So what did you guys do?
Well, once we got back and we got it tested and we got the analytical data to show that it was present, we listened to our inspector who said, just leave, like you need to leave now, don't take anything with you. And in that moment I didn't even think about why we couldn't take anything with us. I was just like, I was done being sick. I was done seeing my son suffer, my pets, my husband. And so we got out of there. We rented a corporate apartment. And from there, the landlords began the whole remediation process.
With all your stuff in it?
With all of our stuff in it. They didn't even move one item out. And of course, obviously now we know the importance of doing that.
Yeah. So I'm guessing things did not go that well, considering what we just brought up. So kind of fill us in on that. How did things go from that point?
This is where, the other side of you comes out whenever you find out that people are lying to you. And with my background and with my husband's background, and I realized that something was off whenever I heard the bid for the project was like $2,500. And this is like a whole home type of thing. Wow. And so obviously I called the landlord and I asked him, what are you having remediated? And he was lying to me. And I knew it. And so I then called the remediation company. Of course, they're saying they can't tell me anything, but I pressed forward and I called pretty much everybody at their company. Wow. Until I found out what they were doing. And of course, they were only fixing 2 spots, not everything. And so I called the landlord back and we got in a big fight. From there, I decided, you know what? I looked into it a little bit further, and I found out that Texas actually has very strict regulations for mold remediation as well as mold assessments. And so I was too sick to learn it all at that time, but I noticed that we qualified with our experience to actually get licensed through the state, and there happened to be a class opening. So I called the state. We got qualified. We sent Josh off to this class to take all of the information to be reviewed by the actual person that teaches people, how to do remediation and assessments. And the instructor there looked at everything and then showed us, yes, they're breaking all these laws. They're not doing it right. So that gave us our ammunition that we needed to go back and say, this is what you should have done. You didn't do it. Now everything is cross-contaminated, and like our belongings were already ruined, but just now even more so because they didn't cover anything up when they were doing remediation. And so also Josh, now being a Texas licensed inspector, he decided to go in and test it himself because the other inspector was like, everything's clear. And we knew
air sample in the middle of the place. It's all good.
Everything's good. Oh, and a little Q-tip, a little swab sample on our couch. Everything's fine because of that. And so, so Josh went in and did his own testing, and sure enough, came back positive. And so we sent them that and just said, you know what, y'all deal with our stuff. We're done. We're not moving back in. And that was that.
Wow. So basically you said, we're done. You left all your stuff behind, said, good luck. We're not paying you rent anymore. We're breaking the lease. We're done.
Yes, basically. Yes.
Awesome. Well, look,
but not in so much politeness, I would say.
Yeah, that was probably more politely put, I'm sure. But yeah, no, so that, well, look, I'm glad that you guys kind of were able to educate yourselves and make the proper decision, see that what was actually being done was not being represented properly, probably against the law in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. You decided to walk away, which probably was the best point, because I think the landlord's true colors came out at that point, I would say.
Yes, they did. And unfortunately, we found out a few things years later. First off, they were actually educated on mold illness. So they actually knew the true dangers of mold illness. So when they tried to question us, that was just a slap in our face. Mm-hmm. And then two, we found out a few years later, a guy came forward after he heard our story, and he let us know that his brother was actually contracted to go in there and just remove all the mold that had shown through the sheetrock and then replace it and paint over it. And so they knew it was there before we moved in.
Wow. So that's a really misrepresentation. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you guys kind of figured that out and got yourself out of that. So let's fast forward to kind of where you are now. You took this class to become educated to deal with your situation properly, but you guys are fully in business now, right? So obviously you took that passion, and Josh is one of the best expert witnesses in the state of Texas. So you guys have come a long way and have really turned this tragedy into a huge passion to help others. So would love to hear more about that, and kind of bring us up to speed from there to now.
Yes. So back when we were dealing with the whole remediation mess, we realized real fast, not only was the landlord lying to us, but so was the remediation company, as well as our assessment consultant at the time. We found out he wasn't even licensed. So he was in the wrong. And when we left and we told them we weren't moving back in, unfortunately, these were the partners that were giving us, that we were in business with, to take over their restaurant. And so all of a sudden, we didn't have that opportunity anymore. So here we were, sick, clueless about, just learning about mold, now without a job. And we had just found out that we were pregnant as well with our second son. And we decided that, we're going to learn everything we can about mold because we knew nothing. And we're going to turn around and educate people. That's where it kind of really started, is we just wanted to learn everything we could and then turn around and spread awareness so we could prevent others from going through what we went through. But then it turned into, you know what, the most important part in the entire process is an inspector going in and finding all the areas of mold growth the first time, so people don't, move back into a home when it's not fully remediated, or they're not taken advantage of because the inspector is not doing what they're really supposed to be doing. So we decided to, yes, just open up our own company and go out there and help people the way that we wish somebody would have helped us back then. And that's what we did. And 6 years later, now Josh, yes, is the top in the state. He mainly does all the litigation cases where he goes in to build cases, and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, thank you for all that you do. When I look at this, and obviously all the pain and suffering you guys went through, no one should have to go through. And I'm so glad that you've realized that and you've channeled that energy to really help others. And so grateful for what you guys do today. And it's wonderful when you get the chance to take something like that and really help and empower other people. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so you're also part of a charity, right? So I would love to hear about that too. Did that come after the fact that you guys started Texas Mold Inspectors?
Yeah, so we started a nonprofit, me and another mother named Elizabeth Kripe, and another mother also helped us named Tiffany Parrott, called Malachi's Message. Because what we learned when we were actually going in and doing assessments for the first few years is that everybody has the same common hurdle, which prevents them from recovering faster, and that's money. Because what people find out is when they're going through mold is that home insurance stopped covering mold remediation. And if they do cover it, it's a very small limited cap. And so a lot of people can't afford to even remediate their home. And then what we found out as well, the hard way, is that your health insurance isn't going to cover any of the doctors needed to help treat you and test you properly. So you have to come out of pocket for all of that money, which is not, cheap. I mean, we spent just over $8,000, I believe, right around eight, a little over, just for the three of us, just to get tested by our doctor. And we couldn't even afford the treatment. And then, of course, when you have to leave all of your belongings, all the porous items, then you have to replace them. And that costs money. If you need to leave your home because you can't stay in it any longer, well, you need the money to go stay somewhere while remediation is happening. So we started the first nonprofit. It's called Malachi's Message. It's named after our son, Malachi, who we lost because of mold. And it's put into place in order to help financially assist people in the areas that they need help with in order to help them recover faster. So it's called Malachi's Message.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And, I obviously devastated over hearing that you lost your son. And as a father of two, I have no words to even understand what you went through. But just thinking about it is thank you for all that you're doing with that and the charity that you started. And I know Malachi's name will live on through that. How do people find you? If they want to connect, how do they find the charity? How do they donate? And I think that it's really important that people understand, what you guys do now in terms of, inspections in Texas, and how they can get involved with the charity. So if you don't mind kind of sharing, how do they reach out for both sides of that?
Well, for Texas Mold Inspectors, you can find us you can just put in texasmoldinspectors.com and our company website will pull up. You can find us on Instagram. I just started our Instagram account a few months ago, so you can type in Texas Mold Inspectors. You can also look up the foundation by just going to www.malachismessage.org, and Malachi is spelled Malachi. So www.malachismessage.org, and you can find the foundation there. There's a donate button, so you can donate however much you want. We also have other categories, like if you want to donate in somebody's honor, it's a good way to kind of help people that are going through mold to say, I understand, and like donate in their own honor and put their name on the wall. We just did a fundraiser for military families that are going through mold. So people can also keep up to date with our fundraisers that we're going to be having moving forward and help there. But yeah, so, and then soon, we're also expanding our company into other states. So soon we should have hopefully a Texas mold inspectors in everybody's state in the next few years.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us more about that. So you're going to be opening up, I'm guessing it won't be called Texas mold inspectors in the other states, or are you going to kind of,
No, it will.
What's the plan there?
It will be called Texas mold inspectors. Okay. Because it will kind of make people understand, first off, ask the question, like, why is there a Texas mold inspector in Tennessee? Yeah. And the reason is because not every state is strict or has any regulations for mold assessments or even mold remediation. So what we found, because we consult all over the country as it is that people in other states where, you know, Henry the painter decides he wants to go be a mold inspector tomorrow can go and do that. All of our inspectors will follow our strict state regulations, but they will be trained specifically by Josh, who is the top expert. They will also be background checked so that everybody knows that all of our inspectors not only know how to do the proper assessments, they will have the proper tools that they're going to be using. They've been trained by Josh. They've also been background checked, and they will have to keep up with continued education to be a part of our company in these states that have zero regulations.
That's amazing. And I love it. You know, Texas mold inspectors, tell them where you're from, where it all started. You know, I'm glad to be able to follow your journey and see what happens. And of course, I'm a big supporter. Anything I can do to continue to support you guys. I've spoken to Josh, I think only really one time, and it was just such a remarkable conversation to really see, you know, someone who gets it and really understands how to help people. And there's very few of us in this industry that truly know how to help people. So I really wanted to thank you so much for everything that you guys are doing. And thank you so much for being here today to share your story. As we end off here, what is something that you would recommend to others who may have gone through similar challenges, maybe going through similar challenges? What is, if you can only recommend one thing, what would that one thing be?
Oh gosh, it's so hard when people say limit it to one thing. The biggest thing I would say is don't lose hope. You know, if you're going through your own mold nightmare or even own personal struggle with something, just remember that this is just a chapter in your life. It's not the rest of the story, and that there's going to be a new chapter coming soon. And just never give up, and just always continue to utilize each day to move forward and get past whatever you're going through. That's what I would recommend.
Awesome. That hope is a great word, and hope is something that we should all have, because look, right now, a lot of things are dark, right? But there is a lot of hope for the future. There's a lot of things changing. Legislation's changing. New bills are being introduced regarding mold. More and more people are becoming aware. You know, we're not anywhere where we need to be, but things are getting better, you know? And so, you know, again, I know that you guys are helping with that on the legal side. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, well, if there's any other last parting words.
Other than, you know, I really appreciate, honestly, meeting you. When I first met you, I just wanted to say that I know we have a strict no referral policy with our company, because that's a huge conflict of interest in this arena. But, you know, you were the first one I've ever talked to that actually gets it, understands it. So I appreciate everything that you're doing out there too. Yeah, likewise. I thank you so much for that. It means the world. And yeah, we'll continue to spread, you know, the right messaging, the right information, and continue to help people. And I know that you guys will always be by my side as we push that agenda further and further. So thank you. Thank you. You know, what an amazing interview. I hope that it was extremely informative to people listening. And again, Texas Mold Inspectors, Malachi's message. Check them out, you know, check their websites out, check out their Instagrams. And thank you again, Emily, and we'll talk soon.